Hi there, I'm Stephanie Geyer-Stevens, and I'm co-author with Françoise Pommaret of Divine Messengers, The Untold Story of Bhutan's Female Shamans by Shambhala Books. And thanks so much to Boulder Bookstore for your interest in the book and carrying the book and asking us these questions. I first traveled to Bhutan in the very end of 2010, beginning of 2011. And it was at that time when I was there as a radio journalist working on a completely other project that I met Françoise, and she was explaining to me why she had come to Bhutan for the first time, and that was for her anthropological research into the Delog, the women, particularly Buddhist women, who die and travel to the hells and return to life with messages for the living. And my mind was blown. And I was so intrigued. I wanted to explore as much as I could, learn as much as I could about the Delog, and ultimately wanted to make a book to discuss them and maybe talk about the last of the Delog. And instead, what we found in the process was that the Delog were expanding, proliferating, and transforming, and that's the story of this book.
Hello from Bhutan. Glorious morning. When I went to look for the divine messenger, who are shamans and Buddhists at the same time, I was helped by many people who took a keen interest on this study, and especially at the beginning, when 40 years ago, when I started my work in Bhutan. And of course, with the years passing by, the interest of the people in their own culture has grown. So they are very enthusiastic about telling you where you can find one of these divine messenger, where they are practicing. So it was not very difficult. It was a kind of hearsay, and then just asking people. And now, of course, with the mobile phone, it's much easier. You can contact them. And we had a great person to help us. His name was Sencho Doji. Very, very interested also. So he was, and he knew a lot of them from his village and valley. So we didn't have much trouble. And once we approach them with what we want to do and with respect, there was it was not a question of gaining their trust. It was just very natural.
So I was really inspired to write this book for a couple of reasons. One is I've worked for many years on understanding the stories and telling the stories of women who have found their power outside the margins of society. And here were the divine messengers who have done also exactly that, that they're very central figures in their society, but they're very much outside the traditional power structures of Buddhist Bhutan. So that was a real exciting opportunity. But equally as exciting to me was the opportunity to really explore in a very profound way an understanding of human existence, the experience of being human that lies outside the realm of our linear world, where as Westerners, we spend probably 99.9% of our time, right? And this was something that I've experienced more and more over the years in different parts of the world where people are clearly not living or see themselves as inhabiting the linear world in the same way as I do. And so this was really a huge opportunity to kind of dive into what that is and how life, how human life is outside those boundaries. And yeah, that was an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up.
The role of the divine messenger in a rural setting, in the village, in isolated valleys, is extremely important because they act as advisor for any problems that the villagers may have. They also give Buddhist advice, so they are very important. The lamas or the monks or the religious people may not be available in the village and may not be easy to talk to in a simple manner. So these ladies who are ordinary ladies from the village are much more approachable for the people, and people do confide in them and ask them a lot of advice. They are counselors, mediators, and there is not really anything very surprising about them, except that they have taken this role because they were called by a divine influence or a divine person to do that. That very often didn't want to do it, and they do it at great cost for their health. But it's extremely tiring. But they do it out of faith, out of feeling that they are needed by the rural society. When one writes a book with a co-writer or co-author, the question of trust immediately arises. And of course, we trusted each other completely. We know each other from before, and we worked with each other, I would say, almost in perfect harmony. There was not a fight for all these years, and but there was tough question, tough call, phone calls. We worked in person, in Paris mostly, and in Bhutan, of course, for the field trip. We worked by Skype, and it was an incredible process because we were both trying to give our best in order to give a good image of these incredible ladies. And we had the same views on many things. The only difference is that Stephanie is a journalist, so she had a journalistic style, and which is great for writing, and I'm more of an academic. And there were questions she was asking me about some research and academic point on the culture that I answered, and then she transcribed them in a beautiful way. So we never had any problem. Except that it was very long, and sometimes very tedious, but it was really enjoyable.
During the pandemic, I've been reading a lot. And just generally as a writer, I read a lot too. But the books that have really been inspiring to me are the ones that give me more access to the interconnectedness of the natural world. And so I would put top of the list, I would put Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass. And most recently, I read her book that she wrote previous to that, which is Gathering Moss. Highly recommend. And I love the way she draws me into a place so deeply that can't be beat. But there were points during the pandemic that some of us might remember as being particularly hopeless, and the politics of the day were completely driving one to distraction. And at that point, I cut out for a while, and I decided to go back to my teenage years and reread The Lord of the Rings, and predicated, of course, by The Hobbit. And if you've only seen the movies, go back and read the books. Other than that, I just would say that a really lovely book that would bring me back to Bhutan whenever I would read it is a book by a very esteemed colleague of mine in Bhutan, Kunzang Choden, who's a historian and an author. And there's one book of hers in particular called The Circle of Karma, that I think is published by Penguin Random House India, that is definitely worth tracking down if you want a deep and abiding sense of what it is to be Bhutanese. I think that's a great place to start.
We would like to call this book a labor of love and respect for these ladies who have faced a lot of difficulties in their daily life when they were growing up, and who have had the incredible stamina to carry on their duty in the society. So these ladies have our respect, and this is not an academic book. We just wanted to give them a voice in the context of Bhutan, and not question their narratives. It is really their narrative. Of course, we have to put it in a context to make people outside Bhutan understand, but it is really a book for them.
Who are Delams? Why do they exist? What is their purpose? Do they play a role in their community? Or are they just simply dear little oddities, relics of an ancient and misty past? Delams are unique among shamans. No other shamanic practitioners have taught Buddhist precepts in the way that Delams have. Although there is not sufficient information to trace their exact history over the past several centuries, it's possible to deduce from what's known that Delams probably arose from a confluence of beliefs from different populations. These include pre-Buddhist Tibetan beliefs. The roots of the Delam can also be traced in part to both Indian and Chinese influences, though it's also likely that their origin could be found among the indigenous beliefs of Inner Asia, where shamans are known to have practiced trips to the realm of the dead. It's a tradition that stretches back hundreds of years, and in Bhutan can be traced back at least to the 17th century. Since Delams deal in the practice of compassion and serve people who come to them for assistance, the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, is their main devotional deity and spiritual guide. A couple of rungs below Avalokiteshvara in importance are the local deities of the region, which communicate through other types of divine messengers. Apchundu, Apjem, and Jomo are the three local deities in Bhutan that speak through the shamans we interviewed, but there are hundreds of deities that are on the same level as these three. In Bhutan, Delams are only women, as far as we can tell, and this could be due to several factors. Traditionally, women did not have much access to the monasteries, and even for those who did, The nunneries did not offer a high religious education. Any woman who had a leaning toward a spiritual life could only experience it on the margins. Considering the situation of the Delum is a glimpse into understanding how someone who is traditionally marginalized and doesn't have institutional authority to be a teacher can nevertheless hold spiritual power in their community.